I saw your wife was walking with another man. One day, I was summoned by a mutual friend of my wife and me. There's no way that could happen, but it's because we celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary as such a happily married couple that no one would envy. I called it stupid, but I brushed it off lightly. This apartments, in a moment of haste, took a photo and showed it to me. Looking at the picture on the smartphone, I was utterly shocked. The woman in the picture was clearly my wife, and the man next to her turned out to be none other than my company's boss, Mr. Walker. I'm James Brown. I am 35 years old and work at a real estate company. I met my wife, Kate, at a social gathering. I was drawn to her modest and demure personality, so I made an aggressive move. But it was a marriage that I finally obtained, in a way as if Kate had given in to my persistence halfway through. I was told I still want to enjoy our life together, and although I wanted children sooner, I respected her wishes. She also had a job, so we had some financial comfort, and we had chosen to be a DINK couple, which stands for double income. No kids, even after marriage. However, just when I had hoped that Kate's feelings would change someday, I was confronted with some photos of a secret rendezvous. While I had managed to put on a strong front in front of Ben, I was doing my best to come to terms with the reality in front of me. It took me some time to sort out my feelings, but I eventually asked Ben to send me those photos. Yet when my wife came home from work, I confronted her about the situation. What does this photo mean exactly? I had intended to question her in an extremely calm manner, but negative emotions overflowed, and I ended up confronting her in an accusatory manner. What's that photo? And it's a misunderstanding. I had hoped for those words from her, but even when I presented the evidence, she remained silent. He couldn't help but get heated and shouted, "Kate, don't just stay silent, say something." But the situation remained unchanged. She remained silent as if she were affirming the affair. I handed the divorce papers I had prepared beforehand to my wife, packed the bare essentials of work attire and casual wear, and then stormed out of the house. Vented absurd for the one who had been cheated on to leave the house, but I couldn't help but do just that. Now looking back, I realize I must have been hoping that Kate would come after me. If she said, "I was the one at fault, please forgive me," then perhaps we could start over as a married couple, I thought. But contrary to my expectations, Kate never came after me at all. But my pride as a man was already severely wounded. I left my home in the heat of the moment. That day, I decided to stay at my best friend's house. My best friend, without asking me anything, gently let me sleep in a separate room. I fully rested my body, but my mind was filled with anger to the point where I felt like the ceiling was spinning. Actually, Mr. Walker, my boss who was in the photo with Kate, has been a long-time benefactor and mentor. And he and I had a close relationship that extended to our families. He also had a very beautiful wife named Helen, and if I recall correctly, they were also dinks like us. We were close enough to go on barbecues and trips together. Of all things, for my wife to engage in a double affair with him was unbelievable. I confront him at work tomorrow and give him a piece of my mind. But while lying down in bed, I clenched my fist tightly. But unfortunately, the showdown between me and Mr. Walker would turn out to be a fantasy. And the next day, a major event occurred that made my anger seem like nothing more than a farce. At ting the following day, while I was getting ready to go to work, my smartphone's ringtone loudly echoed. When I received a call from an unknown number, I involuntarily tensed up and answered the phone.
E. James Brown, the husband of Mrs. Kate Brown. Your wife was driving a car that fell into the harbor, and she has been rescued, but is in critical condition and unconscious. Please come to the hospital immediately.
Jesus, it was news from the hospital that Kate had been in an accident. I couldn't believe it all of a sudden, and my knees were trembling uncontrollably.
Seeing me in such a state must have become concerned. He also took a morning off from his own work and drove me to the hospital.
I arrived at the hospital somehow feeling unsteady on my feet. Kate was a bit late. Her breathing had become so quiet, as if she were sleeping. But the suddenness of the separation left me in such disbelief that I couldn't even shed tears. Little did I know that the last time I saw her was when she bowed her head last night, in peace, while hoping that it was all just a dream and she would wake up. I stood there frozen in place. Later, a nurse arranged for the necessary procedures to take Kate's body back home. I was asked to wait in the waiting room for a while. I stumbled to my seat and rested my head in my hands, feeling lost. As another person who seemed to be waiting for a procedure sat down next to me. When I glanced to the side, what the hell? It was none other than a disheveled and emotionally drained Mr. Walker, with red eyes. At the same time as I was surprised, I instantly became furious. I abruptly stood up, and right then and there, I exclaimed, "Why?" We were a happy couple. If you hadn't gotten involved with my wife, she might still be alive right now. Before I knew it, I had grabbed Mr. Walker by the collar.
It's not what you think, James. It's not. Please listen to me carefully. I should have talked to you about this before it came to this.
Jesus Christ. Mr. Walker was shedding tears with a look of sadness. What the hell? Ye son of a... I was filled with so much rage that I felt like I might strangle him, but Mr. Walker begged me repeatedly. Please, listen to me, hear me out. Over and over again, I finally loosened my grab on him and slumped heavily into one of the waiting room chairs. There's no need for me to be angry at him anymore, especially when Kate is no longer here. The tears welled up as if a dam had burst. Mr. Walker, too, was sobbing uncontrollably, unable to hide his shock. He seemed even more devastated than I was. You're misunderstanding this greatly. Please try not to be confused and listen to what I'm about to say carefully, said Mr. Walker. The truth is, I wasn't the one having an affair with your wife. It was not me. It was my wife who was involved with her. To be honest, I couldn't comprehend what Mr. Walker was saying. Flustered, I replied, "What are you talking about? Don't say strange things at a time like this. Don't confuse me." When I replied that way, Mr. Walker confronted me with undeniable facts. I reacted the same way as you when I learned the truth, so I understand. But you see, as much as I don't want to believe it, this is the truth. because your wife and my wife, they both passed away today. I couldn't stop trembling, my body shaking uncontrollably. Even as Mr. Walker spoke, his voice trembled with emotion. His voice trembled with a mixture of earnest regret and sorrow. I watched his demeanor, and my anger towards Mr. Walker had completely dissipated. It turns out I was the only one who hadn't been informed of the truth. Unbeknownst to me, unimaginable things had been happening one after another. Actually, Mr. Walker's wife, Helen, was apparently in the same car as my wife. Helen, like Kate, was also transported to the same hospital in an unconscious state due to the accident. Unfortunately, it seems she passed away just a while ago. I was brought by Mr. Walker to meet Helen's remains. Seeing this situation, I couldn't deny the undeniable fact that the two of them had been involved with each other. The shock of the situation was so overwhelming that my knees started trembling uncontrollably. Shock, anger, sadness, and various emotions mingled inside me, causing my entire body to shake and tears wouldn't stop flowing. They must have found it unbearable to see me like that.
I'll tell you everything I know, James. They were both lesbians. However, they married men due to societal pressures.
I see. I finally understood all of Kate's actions. When she asked for separate bedrooms, when she requested that we wait a bit longer before having children, and even her surprising lack of affection towards me. If I were told that she simply had no interest in men to begin with, everything she did would make perfect sense. And Mr. Walker learned the fact that the two of them were lesbians from Kate.
Yes, it seems the timing of those photos my friend took was precisely right.
I hurriedly showed some photos on my smartphone, and yes, I confronted them about their relationship at that time. Kate earnestly begged me. She said she wanted to be with Helen. At that time, Mr. Walker was said to be furious. I would likely have rebuffed it, thinking, "What nonsense are you saying?" But, Mr. Walker says, they both apparently realized at first glance that they were lesbians. It was like a bolt of lightning, and both of them couldn't stop the welling feelings. When I heard that story, I didn't know how to react. Mr. Walker's expression seems painful, and it's hard to watch. And I was surprised that Kate, who's usually quiet, spoke so strongly to Mr. Walker. At least in front of me, she had never clearly expressed her opinions before. That's why I loved Kate, who was always gentle and affirmative towards me, especially because I am someone with clear opinions. I had plans to continue living together for a long time to come. From that, I was convinced. Kate must have really liked Helen, and they must have been very troubled about their feelings being different from other women's. But to meet the expectations of parents and people around them who wanted them to marry men, have children, and build a normal family. This conventional, entrenched belief that a couple is only complete when a woman has a male partner. And they must have had a considerable sense of guilt for deceiving their respective partners. What comes to mind is the image of Helen and Kate chatting away side by side during the barbecue. I remember how Kate, who is usually reserved, was giggling, laughing a lot, and even drinking alcohol, which was unusual for her that day. I realized that was herself after she passed away, and this realization only added to my pain. After my emotions had calmed down, I asked the police to explain the circumstances of the accident at that time. A tweet when the car fell into the harbor, it was reported that their bodies were found holding hands when they were discovered. Their hands were tightly clasped together, making it quite difficult to separate them. Upon hearing that, I felt like collapsing to my knees. I was filled with a strong desire to apologize to Kate. I had unilaterally shouted and cornered her without trying to understand her feelings at all. If I had listened to Kate's argument that time, this might not have turned into such a catastrophic situation. They were surely on the path toward true love, so that in the next world they can hold hands and live together. But once all the procedures were completed, I brought Kate's remains back home. After the workers left, in the silent and still space, I can't believe that such a situation would occur after only one day since I left home. I couldn't bear the situation, which made me feel like I was going insane. Just as I was about to have some coffee, I found a piece of paper and a credit card placed on the table. I gently flipped over the paper, and it was a farewell letter from Kate to me. To James, I'm really sorry for making you mad today. I couldn't help but stay silent because I thought you wouldn't believe me if I told you the truth. Please let me confess at the very end. I have been in a relationship with your boss, Mr. Walker's wife, Mrs. Helen, for the past 2 years. I know you probably won't believe this no matter what I say. Actually, at first, I was quite confused by my own attraction to Helen. Since elementary school, I've always felt more comfortable around girls and women, and I had no interest in male idol groups or boys. And for some reason, being around men has always made me feel scared. This is in the midst of all this, as I became a working adult, I met you, James. Due to your passion for me and the encouragement from those around us, we started officially dating. I found solace in how you, James, listened to me and never pressured me into anything. Our married life was going smoothly and peacefully. However, it was during such a time that I met Helen at the barbecue. I can't explain why, but from the moment we first saw each other, we couldn't take our eyes off each other. Hence, it was as if we were soulmates, the one and only destined partner in this world. Helen was in exactly the same state. We appeared to get along well as spouses while continuing our secret relationship, but when we were alone together, we rejoiced in the fact that we had truly met each other's hearts. Even if we were told that this state was considered lesbian, we couldn't turn back. Yet, in the midst of being unable to confess to our respective partners, we were finally discovered by Mr. Walker, who questioned our circumstances. While I was surprised by my own strong plea to not break up with Helen, I was finally happy that I could speak my mind and be true to myself in order to live the way I wanted. But when I was confronted by you, James, I finally realized the gravity of the situation. What both Helen and I were doing could be seen by society as double infidelity and same-sex love, acts that would push our spouses to the lowest point in their lives. After you left the house, I talked to Helen. I'm not dissatisfied with my husband. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to make anyone unhappy. I want to live true to my feelings. We reached a conclusion while crying. Surely by now, James must be aware of that decision, right? I've been truly happy living with you. But from now on, I want to try to grasp the happiness I've thought about on my own, together with Helen. So as you are reading this letter right now, no matter how dire the outcome, I should be happy. I'm sorry for being so selfish until the end. James, please find happiness. Kate. I lay beside the lifeless Kate, alternately looking at her and reading the letter she left behind, crying uncontrollably. The decision made by Kate and Helen was a profound and life-altering one. Even if we had been informed beforehand, I wonder what could have been done by me and Mr. Walker, both in the position of spouses. I'm sure that upon hearing it, I would have panicked and likely tried to separate the two of them. I'm sure both of them saw through it all. Even so, I'm happy now, said Kate in her letter, and those words brought some comfort to me. Yes, no one is to blame. They finally found happiness, after all. 3 months later, the shocking accident. Mr. Walker and I decided to visit their graves together. He also had a letter from Helen at his home, it seems. Upon reading the contents, he felt the profound bond between the two of them, which was beyond our understanding. Mr. Walker and I discussed it and purchased adjacent graves. It was a gesture of atonement from us, the spouses who couldn't understand them until it came to this kind of ending. I clasped my hands in front of Kate's grave and closed my eyes. The tears are still welling up, and it feels like they won't stop. Much taker. All that comes to mind are the wonderful memories I shared with Kate. I thought I loved my wife more than anyone, but perhaps she was suppressing herself, and maybe she was actually suffering. I'm sorry for not realizing it while you were alive, and I silently apologized in my heart as I offered incense. I hope by now they are living happily in heaven. At Mr. Walker, and I said that and looked up at the sky, smiling.